So let's get on with the session. So I'd like to introduce you to today's panel. So I should be able to see in the studio in a second. Luke Goddard from Customs and Immigration here on the right. Hi, Luke.
Hi.
And Lee Madden from GR8 Recruitment there on the left.
Definitely.
And we should be able to see Graham Stokes from Jersey Royal joining us remotely also. Hi, Graham. Hi, Luke. And hi, Lee. So today we're going to be having a panel discussion about things that may affect your business in the way of people post-Brexit. So we're going to discuss settled status for EU nationals in Jersey who wish to continue to live and work in Jersey after the 31st of December, and the requirement for EU citizens arriving after 2020. So there's some challenges there that we're going to cover today, and we encourage you to put your questions via Slido. If you have any problems doing that, we can coordinate some questions at the end of the session. And as always, Jersey Business will feedback those answers to you. So today we're talking about Brexit and the changes you'll see if you employ EU citizens now or you intend to employ them next year. As you know, the UK leaves the EU on the 31st of December 2020. And so from the 1st of January, every EU country will be classified as a third country. We're going to cover the changes to the regulation, what steps as an employer you'll need to take to satisfy these new regulations. So I think the best place to start with this is what's happening right now. So let's talk about the settlement scheme. So I think the best first question would be to Luke in the panel. Could you explain what the settlement scheme is, who needs to apply, and when is the registration deadline?
Hi, good afternoon to all. It's something that most people probably would have heard before, but it's becoming more and more important now as we're getting closer to the end of this year. Part of the withdrawal agreement that the UK will be bringing into force at the end of this year includes, as well as the ending of free movement for EU nationals, the protection of the rights of those EU nationals who are resident in the UK. By an extension of the legal basis for this will have an effect in Jersey as well, and in effect we'll be doing exactly the same thing. So there's a protection built into the legal basis to ensure those people that are resident here, or in fact who are just here before the end of this year, have the ability to remain doing what they're doing for the time that leads onwards from after this year into next year and onwards. So in other words, any person who is working, living, studying in the island here that doesn't hold British or Irish nationality will require an immigration permission as we move into next year. So the settlement scheme is that enabling piece of legislation that allows those people to apply and remain here lawfully and get that immigration permission that's needed, settled status or pre-settled status. So in effect, anyone who is not British or Irish needs that permission and needs to apply to the settlement scheme to remain here lawfully after the end of this year. Now, there's some confusion over how it works and when people need to apply, and a number of people who have applied and not yet got their actual status granted to them. So to start with, eligibility, people are going to be eligible if they have been here before the end of this year, but they don't need to apply until the end of June next year. Clearly, the earlier people apply, the better it is for us to be able to process their application and get their status to them. But it's the application which is the important part, in fact, not even the granting. So at least we know that the application process is in place. Therefore, their rights will be protected until the status is granted. So that's the important part of getting that across. So the registration deadline, yes, is the end of June next year. Sorry, Laura, were you jumping in?
Luke, it's a bit of a challenge sometimes when we're in two different settings. So do you think that's been well taken up by islanders? Are there lots of people on the island that maybe haven't got the settled status yet?
That's a really difficult question to answer. We had an estimate of 20,000 EU nationals in the island that we expected or anticipated may apply to the scheme. We're just over 13,000 that have applied to the scheme now. But the difficulty out of those 20,000, we never had any proper data to confirm how many of those would have left the island, how many will have potentially already got British nationality, who were only here temporarily in the first place, and even though they were counted, never came back to us. So a lot of these numbers were from the consuls in the island, some of it from government data, but the government data was never accurate because there was never a reason to record a European national's nationality. If they were here lawfully, they didn't need to have that record. So it was a challenge to even try and get an estimate. So the rate in which people have been applying has got back to a reasonably steady rate since the difficulty of the period through the COVID pandemic, when there was the best part of a lockdown in the island, but things are coming back to us receiving about 100 a week, which is pretty good. And that's the kind of numbers that we were getting before March this year. And as I said, we're up to 13,000. If we continue at this sort of level, we'll probably be at 14,000, 15,000. And we'll never know 100% whether we've managed to get everyone to apply, but events such as this, we're hoping to keep spreading the word and invite those people to get those applications in.
Excellent. And clearly the business community can assist in that process by looking at their own workforce. So what steps must businesses take if they currently employ EU citizens in their businesses, Luke?
Yeah, unlike the UK, where there is a legal obligation for employers to make sure that their employees have the appropriate immigration status. For the purposes of the EU, this isn't the case in the island anyway, but nevertheless we would expect and hope that any responsible employer would consider the implications for their staff and advise them appropriately. It doesn't cost anything, and it gives them the appropriate rights to remain here. What it will end up doing is, if someone hasn't got the status, is potentially cause some issues if they intend to travel after the end of this year, and especially into the second half of next year when applications should have been made, and people should have had their status by that time. So it obviously it's going to affect businesses if they aren't able to get their people back from holidays or wherever they've gone to, if they're off island. So yeah, we would encourage businesses to speak to those EU nationals and give them the offer to do that. I'd like to make the point that we've had some inquiries from individuals who have had employers tell them that they need to provide evidence of their status before the end of this year. And obviously it's good that employers are considering this, but I wouldn't want to advocate that at the moment, because applications don't have to be in until the end of June. I think it's appropriate at the moment for employers to advise people to get the appropriate status, but I'd hate to feel that they're put under pressure and almost given a concern if they don't have that appropriate status in the right time, if they consider it to be the end of this year.
Most probably enough good housekeeping to take your employees' word that they have applied, they're aware of the scheme. There's no reason there where they wouldn't apply once they're fully aware. How would a business know, though, Luke, if a new entrant into the business had permission to work in Jersey?
So this starts to get quite complicated. So if you've got someone who is eligible to the settlement scheme, they don't need to apply until June next year, so they may not have anything until after June next year. If they have applied, they'll have emails from us confirming that they have made that application. If they've been granted status, they'll have received either a paper copy of a certificate to show that they have status, or they'll have received it electronically, which would have allowed them to print it off and present that. I mean, it isn't absolute evidence of the status, because it's something that could be fraudulently produced. And if an employer wants absolute confirmation, it would need an email through to us from the employee for data protection purposes, for them to give us permission to share their immigration status with a third party, in this case potentially their employer, and make them aware of it. So that would be one way to do it for the settlement scheme. For future employees that come after the end of this year for the first time, they'll require a visa when they come here, and that visa will be in their passports. That's something that employers can actually see themselves if they ask to see that passport.
Okay, fantastic. So if we move forward to January the 1st, okay, and we're now thinking about new workers that we're wanting as businesses from outside of the CTA. So from then on, I suppose we should start with this one with, can you just give us a nice simple outline of what the CTA is, and will workers from inside the CTA need a visa or a work permit?
So the answer is no to both of those. So the CTA is the United Kingdom, Ireland and the Crown Dependencies, which is the Sales, Guernsey and the Isle of Man. Anyone who is lawfully in any of those jurisdictions is able to move throughout those jurisdictions and also able to work in any of the jurisdictions. So in other words, the labour pool today for employers stretches to the limits of the European Union. At the beginning of next year, it will shrink to the common travel area, but nevertheless, all of those people within the common travel area are able to come to Jersey to work without an immigration permission and without the employer needing a work permit. So that's the common travel area.
Okay, brilliant. Now, Luke, can you outline for businesses the two main routes for working visas? So if we want to bring new workers in from Europe from next year, what are the routes in if we want to bring in European workers?
So these routes are really what we have in existence at the moment for those non-European workers who wish to come over today. And in effect, there's two routes. There's a skilled route and a temporary worker route. The skilled route has particular criteria to ensure that someone has a level of skills that we would invite to the island to remain permanently or have the option to remain permanently. Temporary workers is really more to fulfill the labour requirements of employers over here to fulfill lower paid and lower income workers. So the skilled routes have a general salary threshold of £30,000 per annum, or the going rate, whichever is the higher. The job needs to be at an A-level standard. It's referred to as RQF3. This is a national, pretty much internationally recognised level of equivalence of qualifications. So it can be vocational, it doesn't have to be academic. And that also is connected to the job, not the individual. So to give an example, you might have something that you advertise at an A-level standard. You may have someone fresh out of a vocational college who fulfills that but has no experience, but the employer is willing to take them on at £30,000. Or you may have someone who has 20 years experience and doesn't hold a qualification but still fulfills the criteria of the job, and so therefore the employer is still willing to take them on. So that's how that works. There are criminality checks across the board for anyone who needs a visa to come in. The other thing for the skilled worker route is that they can bring their dependents with them, their families. Also that the initial permission given for a skilled worker route is normally 3 years, and normally at 3 years you have the ability to extend your permission to 5 years, at which time you can apply for indefinite leave to remain. It's a bit of an immigration term, but in effect it's one and the same thing as settled status. Someone gets to remain here permanently once they make that application. So that's the skilled route. The temporary route exists at the moment as a seasonal route for agriculture and for the hospitality sectors. And this is a 9-month route, and it requires the individual to leave the CTA for 3 months at the end of that 9 months before coming back again. But it does allow continual seasonal returning workers to come back. There isn't, and the other thing I didn't point out, for the skilled worker route, there's an English language requirement. But there is not an English language requirement for the temporary 9-month route. And there's also no ability to bring the family with them. And again, it's a temporary route. It doesn't lead to permanent settlement.
Great, thank you, Luke. I think a natural question following on from there is, if we are businesses in a different industry other than agriculture or hospitality, is there a way that we can access these seasonal permissions or the 9-month permission outside of CTA workers?
There is. It's worth bearing in mind that from 2004, there were no new temporary low-income worker routes available to come into the island at all. These were only created in the last few years for agriculture and hospitality based on business cases that they put through to us, which were accepted. So that route remains available for other sectors and employees if they wish to come to us. We will consider applications that will be passed through to the Minister for him to make his decision on whether he feels it's appropriate to open further routes for low-income employees for 9 months. We'd be looking to be sure that the companies or the sectors have considered employing within the CTA for those people who don't need work permits to come and work here or immigration permission before really thinking about whether there's a need for those sectors to employ people from outside of the CTA. So that's the kind of evidence we'd be looking for to support a business case.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Luke. Does the business apply for the work permit, and then once it's obtained, the prospective employee applies for the visa? Is that how it works?
Can I just say yes?
Okay, lovely. Just to clarify that point, it's such a new process to a lot of businesses.
Yes.
Okay.
To give you a bit more detail, if you want. Yes, in effect, that's exactly what happens. So there are a number of employers that have done this quite regularly over the last few years. We're going to simplify our work permit process, and in those that have regularly employed and applied for work permits, we're going to provide a sort of if you like, a skilled or a trusted sponsor level to those people, where a lot of the evidence that we're looking for, we are already going to trust those employers to do it themselves, and we will just in effect audit them to be satisfied that they're keeping up to the mark that we're after. Whereas new employers, new sectors will have to actually provide the evidence to us that's needed as an employer. And once we're satisfied and they get granted the work permit, that gets sent through to the employee, who uses it as part of their visa application. We provide details to the employers to pass down to the employees as to how to apply to get their visa.
Okay, and I'm presuming that businesses still need to have the correct seasonal or registered permissions or license permissions in place before they apply for the work permit?
Yeah, that's a simple one of the criterias of a work permit, is that we will only issue it on the basis that there is a business license in place for the position that they want to fill.
Okay,
so that's a simple requirement.
Nice clear process there for businesses to follow. I'm going to bring in Lee Madden there from GR8 Recruitment. So Lee, you're extremely experienced in bringing in workers in that require visas. Before we've joined the EU, have become a third country, you've been doing this for some time. So I think that the businesses we've been talking to in the community here at Jersey Business, that actually there's going to be a lot more interest in bringing workers in now that the EU becomes a third country. And I'm sure lots of businesses want to really understand that process. Can you talk us through that, please, Lee?
Yeah, sure. So we've brought a number of people in, plan to bring a number of people in this year from Kenya to provide a resource to the hospitality industry. COVID sort of stopped that, but however, we did go through the entire process and had one person arrive from Kenya. So the process is fairly straightforward in that the sponsor, the employer, will find somebody who they wish to employ. They will offer an employment contract. Once they've got their employment contract, they can then go through the process of applying for a work permit, which is the number of stepping stones to do so. As Lucas already mentioned, criminality checks, health checks. They must have a vocational training of up to 2 years of experience and satisfy some of the factors as well. Once that work permit application has been processed and submitted to immigration, it will take a number of days for the approval to come through. You will then get issued a work permit, which will then enable the individual to go to the embassy in their own country and apply for their visa. They then can, once the visa's been approved and the work permit's obviously authorised, they can travel and commence work.
Thanks, Lee. So the thing that springs to my mind straight away there is a bit of business continuity planning around timescales. So what's the sort of, how long's that process normally?
So I think for us, from the experience we've had now, businesses need to start thinking now if they want to have people come into the island in January. They need to identify their staff, go through the recruitment process very early in the stages. I would suggest that businesses ensure that their candidates will satisfy the criteria to get a work permit. Whether that be for example, the criminality check, we need to ensure that everybody who will obtain a record of a police check for every country they've been in for more than a year in the last 10 years to enable them to come over on a work permit. So these things take time, and we have found that this can take up to 6 to 8 weeks for some people, especially when you're dealing with people obviously outside Jersey. Then the process of the submission of the work permit to go to immigration for approval. So you're really looking at potentially, to be safe, I would say 12 weeks. So if you are looking for seasonal work at the moment for next year, start planning now. Get prepared.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Great advice there, Lee. Let's speak to a business now that's experienced in bringing lots of seasonal workers into Jersey. So this is Graham Stokes from Jersey Royal. So Graham, this is a really big new process, and this must be affecting Jersey Royal's sourcing of seasonal workers. So may we ask, what steps are Jersey Royal taking to get the number of temporary employees that you require for next year's crops? I think we're having a technical difficulty there, Graham. That might just be me. Can you just check your mic? Go ahead.
All right.
Brilliant. There we go, Graham. We've got you loud and clear. Good old technology.
Okay, well, I think first of all, it's important to emphasise that recruitment's been a challenging area for a number of years now. It's not just something that's isolated to Brexit now, it's looming. But undoubtedly, it's compounding the issue and adding a layer of complexity to it. So some of the key things that we've done is sort of reiterating some of the points made already, is that we've encouraged everyone to apply for pre-settled or settled status where they're eligible to do so and wish to do so. Obviously, we can't force people to do that. But also behind the scenes, we're making sort of preparations to build a robust internal systems that we're going to need in order to allow our sort of HR teams to support the work permit applications and the subsequent UK visa applications. So, there is a resource that we're going to need to service the ultimately sort of 350 to 400 people we tend to bring in on a seasonal basis.
So what do you think the business impact could be to Jersey Royal? We're just interested because it's a good learning experience for others to continuity plan.
Well, I think impact-wise, it's a really important issue to stress for any business that's reliant on seasonal workers and who have a need for people either longer than 9 months or they don't have a natural continuous break of 3 months. Because with the work permit status, it's something that people need to be aware of. For agricultural specifically, compared to the UK, one of the good things our immigration service has done is that we won't have the same restrictions on the number or proportion of seasonal agricultural workers as the UK will have. But in agriculture, we face challenges around that 9-month work and 3-month continuous leave requirement as part of the permit system for the seasonal workers coming into Jersey. So from our personal basis, a lot of people don't realise that growing a potato crop is work almost year round. It's not just limited to planting January through to harvesting back end of July into early August. We've got a significant amount of critical work that's ongoing from sort of mid-September to December, ready for the following year's crop. So that means due to the permit holders needing a clear 3-month break, we are finding that, or anticipating that, as we move away from people who might have pre-settled or settled status to a situation where we might have to draw from people who are going to require the permit and the visa, essentially we're going to need 2 people to fill that one position during our annual cycle. So then the burden of that from a cost perspective and from an admin perspective doubles. And to sort of add to that, what we've got to bear in mind that we're going to have the potential to risk losing access to a skilled and loyal workforce who historically have relied on that pattern of work, which dovetails with their personal circumstances off island, which may not be such an attractive proposition for them in the future. And so that reliance on the back office function of the resourcing and recruitment becomes ever more vital.
Thank you, Graham. That sounds like quite a unique set of challenges, but it might be experienced in other businesses. Something that you highlighted there was the increase to costs to businesses. Is that significant?
Potentially, yes. I mean, as of today, it's not been huge. It's been more of an internal cost as now. But certainly from a very defined cost at the moment is that factoring in the cost of the work permit locally of £115, then we've got the UK visa at £244, then obviously the social security fee of £80. So for each worker, there's £439 in fees from the start. So if we're having to double fill that position, then you're approaching £900 per vacancy per year before you look at the associated costs. So inevitably, there will be an increased cost to the resourcing for the workforce. Unfortunately, we're in an industry that we can't pass that on to the retailers or to consumers. So it's another challenge.
That sounds challenging indeed, but it's great that you're sharing that with that today so businesses can factor that into their cost structures. Okay, so do you use an agency? This sounds like quite a complicated process, or are you just so experienced as doing that already?
Well, in the main, primarily we aim for a direct recruitment model so that we have that immediate link with the people who are interested in coming to work here. But in terms of a supplement to that, we have forged links with a sort of an approved labour sourcing partner. So it's careful in our respect, to carefully define what we term as an agency and an agent.
Right.
So we sort of view an agency as a sort of recruitment firm which sort of supplies a worker per hour per contract, essentially. We have links with a sort of industry-specific labour introduction or sourcing company, which we define as an agent. So yes, we do have access to those, but we do aim for a sort of direct relationship with the employee wherever possible.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's another angle for businesses to start to consider. Thank you very much, Graham. I think we'll come back to Luke there. So we've been talking about the criteria a bit before about what the EU applicant must fulfill. I just wanted to go back over that. I think after speaking to Graham there. So if we're on the 9-month route, what is it that person has to have, Luke?
It's going to depend on the sector. Currently, the agricultural sector has not got a requirement for a specific qualification as the hospitality does, because it's a lot more difficult to find that for the kind of workforce they're looking for. But we do need to be satisfied that they're recruiting from an area or recruiting people that have the appropriate skills to undertake the role, which is what they've been able to do, and it's worked very well to this point. So it's qualifications and skills are specific to the sector and potentially even to the jobs that people are going to be coming in and doing. The other thing that's worth knowing is that the criminality checks have changed slightly from the UK's and will be adopting the same, in that those coming for the 9-month route would need to provide a foreign criminal check from any country they've been in for more than a year in the last 10 years. Because this obviously could potentially mean someone coming from a country where they've only been there for a couple of months and providing a criminal certificate, which is almost meaningless. So it covers the areas that were being missed before.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Luke. And if we see in circumstances that maybe an employee doesn't fulfil the criteria, but as a business we think they do, is there a sort of a process, I should say, around any disagreement on what that skill looks like?
It's something that we end up basically working with the sectors with, to try to determine what's appropriate. Some of it's, I suppose you could say, as common knowledge, but what we certainly don't profess to be as experts across, the job sectors, the variety that's out there in the island, and also ones that we're never going to be expected to know about, that people don't think about, obviously. But so in effect, for instance, with the hospitality industry, we spoke directly with Simon Saw from the JHA, and we came together to come up with circumstances or the skills that we thought were the appropriate levels to fulfill, as well as experience. And these were specific to the college that are being recruited from at the moment from Kenya. There may be some variances to this if it ends up being employees that come from Europe, and this is something that we're working with them on at the moment.
Fantastic. There's some great work going on in the Jersey Hospitality Association around this. And it's a shame we couldn't have Simon with us today. He's just had a lovely little baby girl, and we wish him all the best. And just to move on here, let's have a quick look on Slido. Apologies for technology and thinking on my feet. I just want to make sure we've got any questions here. Distinct lack of questions on Slido, but we do have some more questions that we've had pre-sent in. So let's have a look at here. So we've covered those ones. Okay, so we've already covered here a question that came in earlier, if there's a graduation from the 3-year work permit into more permanence in that role. So Luke, that's great that we have that ability. So as businesses, if we're invested in skilled people coming into the island, we don't have to lose them. So that's something that's come up here in questions. Let's just scan through here. Do feel free to put some questions on Slido. Okay, I'll just have a look on the chat here as well. Okay,
I think
so
Laurie,
Marisa here. I'm sure I'm allowed to read that. Do current business licenses remain with what we have already granted and unused? Oh, I'm very sorry. I read the name there. But so the question coming in was, do current business licenses remain with what's already been granted? So it's a slightly different process. And actually, as somebody who works with businesses, there's often a misunderstanding between registered permissions and what we're talking about today, which is working visas. Luke, can you sort of answer that one?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to know quite a bit more about the business licenses over the last year with working with colleagues within the business licensing unit, especially around the policy that was not published, but the details of what were given earlier this week alongside the information from the Future Border and Immigration System. So the propositions that are in place are to provide a better form of control for the licensing units, and in effect possibly even move to a better control in individuals as opposed to businesses. So the answer to the question there about business licenses, I don't expect them to change in any way, but that's not actually my environment. But the indication that I've got is that won't change. So it shouldn't affect those people for those circumstances.
It's such a common area of questioning. And so what we commonly see at Jersey Business is thinking those two things are linked. And as we've sort of explained, one comes first. You get your registered permission, seasonal permissions or license permissions first from Control Housing and Work, which is business licensing to you and me. And then at that point, if you couldn't find your worker on island, then potentially you could be applying for a work permit for somebody from outside of the CTA. So those in the CTA, it would still be the same process. If you find somebody from, say, the UK and you want to employ them, if you hold the registered permission to do so, you can do so. It's sort of a basic summary there. Hope that's okay. So a couple more questions coming in. So anonymized now, sorry about that before. So what level of English is required for the skilled route? Is there a specific English language exam that is accepted? Also, is the requirement for a work permit and manpower license necessary for a non-paid volunteer, like an intern? Complicated one there.
What was the first one?
I think that's a Luke question. So what level of English is required for the skilled route? Is there a specific English language exam that's accepted?
Yes, there is. It's referred to as a level B1. This is something that's in place at the moment for those people coming in on the skilled route from outside of Europe, and obviously it's basically just being extended to Europeans. It's a level which you would hope that someone could basically get by with their English once they come into Jersey, and so this can be it's quite commonly referred to, and there are plenty of colleges throughout Europe where people can actually go and achieve this kind of level if need be.
There's another question here is quite interesting. I must admit to not knowing the answer to this one. So is a manpower license necessary for a non-paid volunteer? Again, that's not really Luke's area, but you may know the answer to that one, Luke, at all?
I'm afraid I don't.
I can't answer that one myself. I believe, the only exemption that I'm aware of in the manpower currently is the exemption 2013 that allows you to utilise that if you're covering somebody for long-term sick up to a period of 9 months, or if you're covering somebody currently just for maternity. That exempts you from the need of a manpower license. I'm not sure about the volunteer sector. We'll find the answer and we'll put that up there later. The other part of that question, I think, is an easy one for you, Luke. It says for volunteers, non-paid volunteers, is the requirement for a work permit.
For non-paid volunteers, there will be. It depends on the length of time that the work is carried out for. So it isn't necessarily what's being paid for. There are a number of exemptions to what we class as a visitor, and the immigration rules are complex and comprehensive. And I couldn't swear to answering accurately to every single question on this. So in general, when a visitor comes in, it should be as you or I would go on holiday to visit family or to visit a country we've not been at. You're not expected to work or take up voluntary work or do a course or anything else. You're literally on holiday. However, there are some exemptions for work, such as a business visitor who may be giving lectures or maybe checking systems or something like that, as opposed to actually being employed by a local employer. And without being absolutely 100%, I can't give you 100% on voluntary work, but there probably is an exception, but it would again never be more than 6 months. Anything over 6 months would require a visa, and you would probably have other criteria if you were to come in as a voluntary worker other than just being a simple visitor. For instance, a student visitor, whilst they don't require a visa if they come from the EU, will have to fit other criteria and satisfy us that they're going to a fee-paying establishment, that they're paying the fees, and that they have the ability to maintain themselves whilst they're here.
Okay, brilliant. That's a good rounded answer there. That ticked the box for me. But if that doesn't, for the anonymous submitter of the question, just get in contact with us at JCIS and we'll expand. So we'll go over that at the end of the call, how you can find more information. Last question here. So again, Luke, these all seem to be coming in thick and fast for you. So kindly explain whether the professionals from Commonwealth will enjoy any advantages when joining the UK. Having worked in Jersey, does it give you an added advantage when applying to work in the UK?
Right, so there are some different rules that apply to some Commonwealth nationals, but in effect they don't actually have much difference in the way that someone's able to come and work here. The countries in the world are split roughly in numbers into half of what we consider to be visa and visa-free national countries, but nevertheless that's only for visitor. Anyone who wishes to come and work requires a visa either way, and it's the same criteria from wherever you come from. There's reference there to working in the UK. I don't know if it was meaning Jersey or the UK, but it's worth knowing that the working permission that we grant in Jersey is specific to Jersey. It doesn't apply to the UK, and should people move between the UK and Jersey having had permission in one of the two jurisdictions, they need to regularise their permission in the other jurisdiction. So often we will extend a UK working visa to Jersey and vice versa, but it isn't automatic because our rules are not identical in that area.
Okay, thank you very much, Luke. We've got some questions coming via Slido now. Thank you very much. So why has the temporary employment permit been set for 9 months?
So we extended the existing 9-month temporary worker route from what happens at the moment moving towards Europe. So it was one that was already set and accepted. As I said, at one point there were no temporary low-skilled or low-income positions at all available. The UK introduced an agricultural system and they limited it to 6 months, and it required a 6-month absence We spoke to industry, and it was accepted that the argument that was made that they needed a further 3 months, and it was stretched up to 9 months at that point. It has worked well. We've managed to maintain a robust system in place with those people that are fulfilling those 9 months, and it was considered appropriate to continue with it.
Thank you very much. Okay, so somebody here is a bit concerned personally. So they've not yet received their settlement scheme confirmation. How can we reassure individuals, islanders, valued to us, that may be feeling unsettled by the settlement process?
Nicely put. I'm really glad we've had this question. It is something that the casework team, who I work alongside for the settlement scheme, are now receiving numerous inquiries about, and quite understandably, I think. We've had a real issue during the period of COVID since March in not being able to complete a number of applications, and a large number of applications that have been made, simply because our process did rely on a personal appointment where people presented their passport or their ID cards, and we issued a certificate at that time. Clearly through COVID, we haven't been able to do that. We are at the very last stage of implementing an online system which will allow those people to complete their applications by submitting images of themselves and their identity document via Yoti, and it confirms their identity and carries out relevant security checks on the identity document to a level that satisfies us that we can issue the status based on the verification of their nationality and identity at that point. I am itching for this to come on board, and I'm told that we're only days away from being able to start this off. People will be invited to apply, and they'll have some specific data given to them making that application to us. It won't be open to all immediately. You'll need that invitation. But the really important point to receive from this is that I completely understand people's anxiety in not yet having got their granted immigration permission, but it's the application at the moment which is the important part of the system. As long as the application is in place, your rights are protected all the way through until the end of June next year. And I can give absolute assurances that they'll receive their statuses by that time, and we're working as best we can to try to get these statuses out to people as soon as possible. So please take some assurance that this is being looked at carefully and with urgency to try and get those people to complete those processes that we've got in place.
Thank you, Luke, for those reassurances. Puts my mind at rest, and I hope that that makes you feel a bit better, our anonymous submitter. So we also have a very conscientious business here who's asked, can we have an adapted social security scheme designed for seasonal workers to be reasonable and fair to them?
It's a really difficult. I can't make comments on the social security system, unfortunately. So I'm not familiar with what the question is asking about.
I would imagine that's around those seasonal workers' access to things like healthcare. I mean, I'm putting words in this submitter's mouth. I imagine that the businesses that bring seasonal workers on island have a lot of control and checks around the housing that they provide as part of that permission. So I'm imagining it's to do with social security and maybe access to medical. Lee, GR8, do these seasonal workers have access to these types of healthcare? Maybe that's what the question's around.
No, I'm no expert myself, but as far as I'm aware, that on the 9-month permit, they don't have access to the healthcare. My assumption would be if they're an emergency and need treatment, they will get the treatment. But I don't believe it's a long term. Maybe it's something that we can clarify in follow-up questions at the end of the webinar.
Okay, thank you very much. So I appreciate you taking the question well out of the normal remit there. Okay, so we've talked about, there's a few more questions here about English speaking skills. So I think we've covered that well.
Sorry, Laurie.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
I think that last question may have been referring to the settlement scheme, not the social security scheme. I'm not too sure.
There we go. There's the penalties of using a mobile phone to use Slido and tech at the same time. I do apologise. How would you interpret that question, Luke?
Just going to have to reread it now. So can we have an adapted settlement scheme? designed for seasonal workers to be responsible and fair to them. Or maybe I have misunderstood, but if it is the settlement scheme, this is in place purely to protect those people that are resident before the end of this year. There was no intention or consideration given to adapting this for those people who may arrive following the end of this year. It's to do with ensuring that we're protecting those people who are resident here now in the island. And future moving forward is just to be managed within the future border immigration system, the visa system and work permit policy that we have, if that is what the question was about.
Thank you very much, Luke. A follow-on question here, nice easy one. What's the cost of acquiring settled status?
Nothing, it's free.
Brilliant. And I think that's a bit of a misconception I've seen out there earlier when the UK were charging for their counterpart initially, I believe that's correct. So that's great to address that misconception. Completely free for Jersey Islanders. So over here on the group Zoom chat, we've got another good question. So if you get a job offer in Jersey Island at the end of your 9-month seasonal or part-time contract, can you have your visa extended?
Right, so it's one and the same thing to the majority of people. The visa is what you apply for in the first instance, and it is a form of immigration permission. If it's 9 months, it runs out at the end of 9 months. You would then apply for further leave to remain. It's not actually another visa, it's immigration permission of another sort, so it means the same thing. If you are employed with a specific employer that only has the work permit for that period, that's as long as you're going to get your immigration permission for it. It won't be extended. If you were to make an application for a position in a skilled role with a new employer within the period of time that you were here, within the 9 months as a temporary worker, we would consider that application.
Okay, but my understanding is if they were here on a 9-month permission, they would need to be off island after that period for 3 months. Is that right?
That's part of the requirement of that initial permission. It would depend if the application was made in time and then we did grant another permission before the end of that 9 months. Therefore, immigration permission would be in place outside of those 9 months, those 3 months absence that was required. So the 9-month, 3-month absence is in the absence of any other kind of immigration permission.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. I'm going to flip back onto Slido. There's thick and fast questions coming in. So somebody just wanting a confirmation there. I think Graham from Jersey Royalty gave a great outlining of the cost there. Can you just reconfirm the costs of the process for acquiring the work permits?
Yes, as advertised, the Jersey work permit, Luke will be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but is £115. The follow-on requirement for a UK visa is £244 for the 12-month visa. And then obviously additionally to that, to come and work in the islands, we all must have the £80 social security registration fee.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Graham. Back onto Slido. So why is the temporary work permit only available for agriculture and hospitality and not construction, only considered on exceptional cases? So it's a Luke question, I think, there.
There are the two areas I think that are slightly mixed up there. So to answer the first part of the question, it's really repeating what I've said in that the agriculture and hospitality sectors came to us, provided a business case on the need to be able to employ people initially from outside of Europe. That stood and was agreed, and therefore the 9-month routes were opened up. So it has been established there is a need for them to be able to bring in people. This hasn't been the case for other sectors. However, we remain open to those who wish to come to us, the construction industry if need be, on the basis of submitting a business case to us for us to establish if we feel all the points have been met for then presentation to the Minister for him to make his decision whether he would open up the 9-month route to another sector. So it's basically just treating them the same as the other sectors. The exceptional case basis is probably a reference to the skilled worker route. So what I was just referring to is the 9-month route. Within the skilled worker route, there are some exemptions from the £30,000 salary threshold for those areas that have already been agreed both through the business licensing unit for new registration positions and for customs and immigration for existing immigration routes that were already recognised as either being a skills shortage or being of significant benefit to the island. And those have been carried forward as exceptional positions with a lower salary threshold. And there are no specific ones to construction. They don't exist in the current exemptions through business licensing or through immigration. But again, these positions are open and available for industry, for sectors to come to us if they consider a particular position should be considered at an exceptional level.
Brilliant, thank you, Luke. I think that's a very clear takeaway for me today, that you really need to speak to customs and immigration. If you have any concerns or questions, they're very open to discussing this, and we're going to give you some details about further information in the end. I'm just going to, sorry guys, there's quite a few questions coming through, but I think we're running out of time. So I think we should finish on a bit of a summary. So, in Jersey Business, we're all about continuity planning, a bit of a buzzword because we need to think proactively about solutions. So I'll go to Luke. Okay, what would you suggest businesses do today?
I think it's really important that they consider, really as responsible employers, their employees that either have concerns or for whatever reasons have not applied to the settlement scheme and are eligible to it. It would be such a shame to have people who are eligible and don't apply and end up in a situation where they have difficulties in getting their permission and could get it quite simply by coming through to us. Secondly, for new employees next year, do think about the requirements you're going to have, and we're, as Laurie says, we're open to trying to respond to any questions that you have about it. But do look on the website. We're trying to get as much information as possible on the website, specifically the work permit policy, which gives a lot of detail about the requirements and the processes to follow. So those are my giveaways for businesses in the island.
I think it's really important as well, Laurie, that businesses actually get ready for this. They haven't got their head in the sand at the moment. They're looking to the future, looking to next year and getting ready for what's happening next year and planning ahead and making sure that what you need next year you're planning for now and getting ready for it.
Brilliant, thank you, Lee. Definitely. Graham, what would you advise business to be doing?
Well, I think I just mirror what Lee and Luke have said there. Preparation is the key with it, because it's not a fast process that you can have a recognition that you need somebody next week and expect them to be here the following week. There is an amount of work that's going to be needed to achieve somebody to come in, and it's also worth bearing in mind that just because you make that application for a work permit, it doesn't mean to say that it's going to be granted, because the circumstances of the individual who you're applying for, they may not pass or meet the criteria. So you may have to go through a few people in order to find a suitable candidate to come in.
Excellent, thank you very much. So my time frame here was that we were finishing today at 3:30. We've done a lovely summary there, and I'm just being encouraged to ask a last few questions from Slido before I give you some links to the last bit of further information. So let's have a quick look here. There must be some great questions on here that the team over in comms are wanting me to ask. So I can see another one here, a quick one then for Luke again. Can students from a third country studying in a UK university work in Jersey?
I thought I got away with it. That's a bit of a technical one. So this is a third country today. So this is someone from outside of Europe studying in the UK. Can they come and work here? There are some permissions within the student visa routes that allow some work outside of study, and those are usually just to top up the income of those people might have. It can't be something they rely on to do work in. And I'm not convinced this fits sort of out during holiday period of study. So in practice, a UK person isn't going to be able to come here and work anyway for evenings and things like that. Having said that, if a student does have a UK permission to work, that will not automatically allow them to work in the island here anyway. They would need to come to us to ensure they satisfy our own immigration conditions. I'm not convinced they would fulfil that. I can't answer it completely at the moment, but it's something I can post later to confirm.
Lovely, thank you, Luke. To my timing, we have 3 minutes, so I think what's left is to thank all the panelists today. We've had some quite detailed questions and bespoke questions, so I'd encourage all the businesses watching to look at all the many resources available to find more information. So the Jersey Business website, you can head to jerseybusiness.je, and if you scroll down to our Get Advice section, there's a clear icon there for Brexit. Now, those pages have been prepared in partnership with External Relations and Customs and Immigration to assist businesses in navigating what could be potentially a difficult change in Brexit for people and for export-import. So please go and have a look at those resources. There's also a direct contact email that I have here, Luke. Is this correct? It's letstalkbrexit@gov.je. Is that still the best place for businesses to ask their questions?
I'm told that isn't the correct email address at the moment.
Okay. Do we have anybody on comms who can provide that quickly to us? If not, we can. If we don't have that to hand now, we can get that up on our website, I'm sure, or out to everybody that's watching today.
Beyond Brexit event at gov.je.
Okay, Beyond Brexit event at gov.je. So have a look at that. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. I'd just like to say a last big thank you to Luke, to Lee, and to Graham. Thank you for today.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Laurie.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.